still the main event. The Olympics are still the main event. The Olympics are still the main event. The Olympics are still the main event. And the Olympics are still the main event. And the Olympics are still the main event. And the Olympics were not scheduled to start for 4 more months. And they got pushed back a year today. And I keep hearing people say the sports calendar. There is no sports calendar.
Right.
I talked to Bob Costas about this. He did 11 primetime Olympics for NBC and did another one in late night. And he said, people keep saying that things are going to be back to normal. And he said, tell me what normal is. And it's amazing that it took this long to cancel the Olympics because, as Costas said, 10,000 athletes, delegations, media, throw them together for like wrestling, basketball, have them live together in the Olympic Village, and then send them back home to where every single country has a varying healthcare process. And what bad could come out of that? Everything. And so the point of this column is people keep saying, well, the NBA may come back in the summer and the NFL will be all right in the fall. Nicole, if the Olympics can go, anything can go. And nobody has any way of knowing when it will be safe for these people to be back on the field again.
And I imagine it's not just the players, and a lot of them have the means to actually be spending time doing great philanthropic things. I follow a lot of basketball players and baseball players, and some of them have used this time to reach out. But all the people who are supported by the businesses behind baseball and basketball, all the people that work at stadiums, all the people who sell merchandise, all the people who work at television networks that cover them, just talk about the broader economic impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sports, by and large, have been pretty good taking care of arena workers and stadium workers. Will that mitigate what they would have made if the season went on? I don't know. Kevin Love was the first athlete I know of to step up. He's with the Cleveland Cavaliers now and donated $100,000 to arena workers in Cleveland. And now a lot of owners have done that. But I was also thinking about charity, too. I mean, the PGA Tour has given up billions of dollars in charity. And if the longer this goes, those charities are going to be affected, too. And so it's not, as James Patterson said the other day, it's just not just like we had our toys taken away. It's more profound than that. And again, even during World War II, they played baseball. The Olympics were only canceled 3 times that I know for world wars. But this is different. And anybody who tells you they have a reasonable idea about when sports is going to come back, they're just blowing smoke, Nicole.
But we can all hope and pray, right? Because a world without sports is very different. Mike Lupica, we need to pick up this conversation again another day this week. It's a treat to get to see you.
It's always great to talk to you.
We are going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is so disheartening to me. Do you realize how many hundreds of millions of dollars that call just got through making in shutting down the Olympics? We're talking about vendors. We're talking about programmers. We're talking about major radio and TV stations. We're talking about... Wow. That almost took my breath whenever I seen that this morning. Good grief. Almost cried.
Coming up in the next hour here, a White House coronavirus task force briefing. Now, the White House hasn't told us exactly who will be in today's lineup, but we're watching and waiting to see if Dr. Anthony Fauci will be there as his clash with the president continues to spill out into the open. Fauci was notably not present at today's Fox Town Hall or the last White House coronavirus briefing. Trump claimed he wasn't invited today because they weren't addressing matters that Fauci was best on. Fauci's specialty, it warrants noting, is stemming the spread of infectious disease. That does it for this hour. MTP Daily with my colleague Chuck Todd starts right now.
welcome to Tuesday. It is Meet the Press Daily, and good evening. I am Chuck Todd, continuing MSNBC's special coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. At this hour, we are awaiting an update from the White House's coronavirus task force, which is scheduled to start in roughly 30 minutes. We weren't sure we were going to get a briefing from the task force because of the president's town hall, but apparently we are now. It'll be interesting to see if the president himself participates. We've not seen the seal, so that tells us maybe not. We will be keeping a close eye on that for what Nicole mentioned. We want to see if Dr. Fauci is there, because we expect the medical experts to be pressed on their assessment of President Trump's rather rosy timeline, that the country will be back open by Easter, even though so far the number of cases in the U.S. shows no signs of slowing. Confirmed cases have now surged about 50.
Clearly worsening right now by the hour, but the president says he wants U.S. businesses to reopen by Easter. He'd like to see churches full on Easter Sunday.
That's right, Wolf. And the White House says there will be a coronavirus task force briefing after all of this evening, after indicating officials were opting for a town hall on Fox instead. The president said, as you said, Wolf, he wants the economy back up and running by Easter, adding he wants to see, quote, packed churches on that Sunday. But the president's push to return life to normal is worrying both Democrats and Republicans, who say he's going too fast, causing confusion, and quite possibly endangering lives in the process.
President Trump is heading over now.
In a televised town hall on Trump-friendly Fox News, the president set a date for when he'd like to see the U.S. economy functioning without the current coronavirus constraints.
I would love to have the country opened up and just raring to go by Easter. I think Easter Sunday, and you'll have packed churches all over our country. I think it would be a beautiful time.
The president insisted his plan could work by encouraging Americans to go back to their jobs in the weeks to come, while still practicing social distancing.
We can socially distance ourselves and go to work, and you have to work a little bit hard. You don't have to shake hands anymore with people.
When asked if she backs the president's goals for the virus, one of his top medical experts, Dr. Deborah Birx, would only say she needs to see more data on the global pandemic during the nation's ongoing 15-day social distancing period.
Every American needs to continue the president's guidelines for these next 6 days or 7 days.
The president also denied his administration botched the shipment of coronavirus tests around the country, even though some governors say that's exactly what happened.
We did not screw up, and I don't think CDC screwed up either.
Mr. Trump continues to make questionable claims about the coronavirus, suggesting it's just as bad as the seasonal flu and car accidents. But experts say the coronavirus appears to be more deadly than the flu.
We lose thousands of people a year to the flu. We never turned the country off. We lose much more than that to automobile accidents. We didn't call up the automobile companies to say stop making cars.
It's not just
This guy, he's coming unhinged whenever it comes to the safety and the well-being of the American citizens. This thing's just now starting to pick up over here in America, and now all of a sudden he's crawfishing and he's wanting everybody to go back to their regular normal lifestyle like everything's hunky-dory. I think what it is, he sees the catastrophe that's going to hit on an economical scale because of all the factories and shutting down all the restaurants and all this and all that. And now he's realizing that this is going to be the failure in his administration. And his administration is basically going to get the blame for not bringing severe awareness to the American people quick enough so that we could have properly prepped for this. Instead, now all of a sudden it's been thrown in our laps just within the past week. And now less than a week later, the president wants to crank the motor back up. Get the machinery back up and going again. You know, I just got through watching where they just got through shutting down the Olympics over in Japan. How come we're getting all these mixed messages from the president of the United States? I'm going to tell you why. I figured out that he don't know his ass from a hole in the ground whenever it comes to running a country this size, especially under a crisis like this. Could you only imagine if a Pearl Harbor attack would happen? during the time that we was down and out? Could you only imagine if another 9/11 happened during the time that we was down and out? We would be literally screwed with this guy, because he would probably start a nuclear holocaust to the point that we would all be doomed. Not just part of us, but all of us. If he don't know how to run a country during the center of a Katrina, let's just use this as a Katrina multiplied times 1,000. Okay? This is a Katrina happening here in America times 1,000. It's 1,000 Katrinas that's combined, that's hitting from the East Coast to the West Coast to the north border to the south border. In conjunction with us being $23 trillion already in debt, in conjunction with the problem with all the illegal immigrants coming from down in Mexico and coming over in Cuba, over in the Miami Homestead area, in conjunction with there being 2.3 million incarcerated prisoners, either in federal jails, prisons, or local facilities, in conjunction towards all the other problems that has been going on. Now all of a sudden, you're going to tell everybody to crank the motors back up? I just wonder how many people's going to follow his advice towards going back to work or going down to Disney World, not knowing if you're going to wind up catching the coronavirus. I'm not going to Six Flags. I'm not going to the Disney World. A matter of fact, I'm not even going to a NASCAR race. As well as I like NASCAR races, I'm not going to a ball game. I'm not going to a football game or a baseball game or a softball game or a little league game until we get this straightened out. How come you have on one side of the planet shutting down the Olympics, and on the other side of the planet, over here, now the president all of a sudden wants crawfish? Wow. Talk about mixed messages. We got to get this right, folks. If we don't get this right, this could very well cripple us for years to come pertaining to people's health. Because whenever you have people dropping like flies, similar towards what went on over in Italy, Germany, Spain, I think Iran, and other parts of the world, when you have something this severe, you can't chance it in my book. You know, just a while ago, I just got through going to E.W. James over here in Union City. And I was absolutely amazed at the fact that a little mom and papa grocery store actually has a better variety of meat than what Walmart has. They was out of toilet paper, hand sanitizer. But the fact of the matter is, their meat department looks so much more plenishable than Walmart, because every time I go in Walmart, it looks like it's been ravaged by a bunch of savages to the point that you can't find no meat. Now, unless you get there about 7 o'clock there in the morning. But I'm thinking to myself, I need to put on a mask. Believe it or not, God led me in the direction towards buying a couple boxes of sanitized masks before all this stuff unfolded the way that it did, to the point that now you can't find a mask nowhere in the world, I don't guess. But I went in there with a mask on. And all of a sudden, one of them hillbillies hollered at me, "Hey, boy, you don't need that mask on. This is just a hoax. They're just making all this stuff up." You still have people in Tennessee that hasn't been persuaded that this is real. And if you got people in Tennessee in a E.W. James's local hometown country grocery store that don't believe it's real, How many other people in America, including Donald Trump, that don't believe it's real? They must think it's some sort of a fictitious, like a fairy tale story. They must be thinking that it's a fairy tale story. There's something about this disease, I've been noticing the characteristics of it, that it seems like once it gets up to a point, that's whenever the beast basically sticks out its ugly head. And that's whenever people start dropping like flies. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that or not. But it mutates and it goes after its victims, okay? And they become contaminated. And they don't realize that they're contaminated. They're walking around, they don't have no symptoms. In other words, it's kind of a slick willy. And it infests hundreds and thousands of people during the time that it's going through this transformation period. And then all of a sudden, when it gets to a certain point, boom, bam, it's like all of a sudden, wow, everybody's got the freaking disease. That's what we're seeing the characteristics of this coronavirus do. And it's almost like it's got its own pattern in how that it not only affects people, but it's got its own pattern when it actually merges to its fullest extent, to really taking off. It would be the same thing if somebody was driving down the road 55 miles an hour and all of a sudden you floored it. You floored it. And man, you talk about acceleration. Oh, you done got plumb over 100 miles an hour because you floored it. That's what I'm seeing, and I'm sure other scientists and doctors are seeing the same thing. It's a pattern of how this disease will creep. It's kind of like a creeper. It creeps up on society, and then all of a sudden, boom, bam, it explodes, bam. And that's what the scientists and that's what the doctors is trying to prevent from happening over here, just like I'm shutting down the Olympics. It literally almost made me tear up whenever I seen them shut down, make a conscious choice today of shutting down the Olympics. Because the Olympics is something that a lot of people put a lot of heart in towards it being global. It's internationalist. I mean, it's universal. That's one of the universal things that pulls everybody together is the Olympics. The Olympics pulls countries together that sometimes are still at war with each other, still fighting at each other. But yet no, whenever it comes to the Olympics, this is an area that we can kind of put our guards down and we can kind of trust each other because it's each country for himself. So whenever I seen them shut down the Olympics, it was like, oh my God. And then I turn on the news and I hear Donald Trump's telling everybody that by Easter he wants all the churches full and all the factories up and running again. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, how contrary, how mixed messaging can you get whenever on the same day you see where they're shutting down a world event and then 3 hours later you have the chief and commander telling everybody that he wants to see the churches full on Easter Sunday. You know, I would like to see the churches full on Sunday. I would like to see the churches full on Sunday. I'm a spiritual man. I'm a religious man. But not at the expense of contaminating more people and seeing more people die that didn't have to die. I would love to see the churches full on Sunday. Love to see it. And wished in a way that this coronavirus never ever even come about. But there's nothing that we can do about it now other than grin and bear it. I wished 1,000 times that this has never fallen upon to society this way. Because it's affecting people's lives. It's causing children to suffer. It's causing mothers to do without. It's causing fathers to wonder, how am I going to survive? Am I going to be able to make the next rent payment or the house payment or the car payment versus having enough groceries, not knowing if we're going to have enough food to eat off of. And it's causing so much anxiety and so much worry and so much turmoil and so much, it's terrifying in a lot of people's minds. I'm lucky. I'm very lucky. I'm single. I'm 59. Most everything that I have is paid for. I have very few bills other than my essentials and my phone and my Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance that comes out of my Medicaid, for my Medicaid and Medicare. I got my insurance. I got my phone. I got my essentials. I've got a couple bills. Nothing big. I got a couple bills. But the main thing is that I don't have responsibilities underneath my house right now as far as me feeding children. I don't have no children. So my responsibilities are very, very limited. The only thing I got is 2 cats. I got 2 cats. So what? If they can't fend for them, if I can't fend for them towards feeding them, they'll get out here and feed themselves. They'll turn into hunters out here, and they'll get on the wild side towards catching mice and stuff, varmints. They'll take care of themselves if something was to happen to me, and I know that. As long as somebody didn't shoot them or poison them, or a raccoon or a coyote kill them and eat them, they would be fine, because I don't clip my cats' paws, because that's their defense towards being able to climb trees and get away from a coyote or another vicious wild animal. That's their only defense out here, because I live out in the country. But could you only imagine if you had 2 children, or 1 child, or 3 children, or 5 children? I guess the Mennonites, in a way, they're probably taking it on the cheek, and it probably don't mean a whole lot to them pertaining to how the world's being turned upside down, because basically they're self-sufficient anyway. The Mennonites and the Amish, they basically raise all their food. They still make all their clothes. They make their soap. They self-educate their children. They're basically a commune of themselves towards being self-sustainable, the Mennonites and the Amish people. And there are a few other Indian cultures out here, if you was good enough to be on the roll call, that basically the Native American people take care of the Native American people. In other words, they have resources and they do things in a completely different method in comparison to the majority of the world, because they're self-sustainable. But not everybody's on the roll call. And not everybody is a Mennonite or an Amish person. So I can only imagine right now the anxiety that's going on in young women and even children of not really recognizing and understanding what's really happening right now. Because they don't. You know, whenever you're 4 or 5 years old, you may give the impression that you know what's going on. A while ago, there was a little girl. She was about 6 years old whenever I was at the E.W. James's store. And I had my mask on, my surgical mask on. And she looked at me, and then she looked at her mother and father, and she pointed at me, and she said, "He's got mask on, he's got mask on, he's got mask on." Well, see, her mother and father didn't have a mask on. And the little girl didn't have a mask on. But at the age of 6 or 7, she identified, hey, I'm seeing everybody on TV wear a mask. Here this man is with a mask. How come mom and daddy don't have a mask? How come I don't have a mask? I'm sure that's what she was thinking. Now, whenever you get to children below 6, odds are they're not going to understand what's happening pertaining to the mask. They're not going to be able to identify this crisis. They're not going to know or be able to relate of whether or not this is going to get direly crazy and worse, such as we've seen in other countries. They have no idea. They can't grasp it. They're not at the age yet to the point that they can identify the dangers. That's the reason why the adults take care of the children, is because, you know, they're still learning. They're still understanding what's going on around them. They're very fragile in how that they perceive and understand things. Some of them learn a little quicker than others. Some of them may actually start intaking what's going on around them, like that little girl that was probably about 6 or 7 years old. He's got mask on. He's got mask on. And looking at her mom and father and pointing at both of them and pointing at herself, so like, how come we don't have a mask on? So see, she was understanding. She was identifying that how come I was wearing a mask and Mama and Daddy wasn't wearing a mask. The thing about it is the majority of the people around here in Tennessee aren't wearing a mask. You know why they're not wearing a mask? Because they think it's a hoax. Just like the other guy that while I was standing there on the line looked at me and said, "Man, you done bought into that," or said something crazy to the extent such as, "Wow, I can't believe you're wearing a mask." Well, what business is it that I'm wearing a mask? What business is it to that hillbilly that I'm wearing a mask? What difference would it make if I was wearing 10 masks? If I had one over my head, or one over each ear, one on the back of my head, if I was walking around with a big clear bubble over my head, just so I was getting oxygen to myself, what difference does it make? Who is he to make fun of me because I'm wearing a mask? I can't help it that he don't take this serious to the point that he's got something covering over his mouth just in case he don't want to get infected. I know for a fact there's 3 or 4 cases around here where people has died. There's one in Milan, one in Dyer County, one up towards Paris. So it's here. The virus is here. And like I said a while ago, it labors in a slow laboring way. Almost to the point that it's almost at an idle until it reaches a certain point, and then once it hits that certain point, it explodes. I've never seen nothing like it before, but it's following the same characteristics not only in China, but in Spain and in Italy and in Europe and in other parts of the world too as well. So how come we're having a president that tells us one thing, and then 7 days later, he's already wanting to crawfish and reverse it? That's my $64,000 question. I mean, he should have known whenever he made the decision that he made that this was going to be unproportionally unprecedented whenever it comes to the financial recourse that this is going to cause towards shutting down factories and shutting down businesses. He should have known that before he ever made the call. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, he don't want to be responsible for the economy going bad. Well, guess what? Guess what? He possibly already is, because of his lack of understanding the seriousness of this disease. And yes, he may have stopped the airplane flights, but at the same time, he did not engage in other practical means towards making sure that he had the doctors on board, the scientists on board, and making sure that we had the proper testing devices to be able to test us just in case it was to break loose like it had broken loose over in China at that time. He should have made that conscious choice, not just in the 29th of January towards shutting down the airlines going to China, but at that time is whenever he should have, or his committee, his administration, if he's got one. I don't know, he keeps firing everybody. Don't nobody want to be around him. He should have made that choice within the first week, maybe 2 weeks. I give him 2 weeks. The second week of February is whenever he should have looked at this in a much more profound way, the information coming from, by that time it already hit mainstream media, pertaining to what was going on in China, and he should have looked at it in a much more seriouser light and said, you know what, we need to start getting things on board. A storm is coming. A storm is on its way, and we need to make sure that we got this, and this, and we need to make sure that we have proper means of the people that's on the front lines fighting this thing. But he didn't. He didn't. Those are facts. And now we're basically in the center of the storm. the eye of
Democrats
the
who
storm.
disagree with the president.
You have to stay in. And for the president to make light of that as if it's like, well, so what? Some people will die, but the economy will grow. No, you hurt the economy if more people are sick.
Republican Congressman Liz Cheney tweeted, "There will be no normally functioning economy if our hospitals are overwhelmed, and thousands of Americans of all ages, including our doctors and nurses, lay dying because we have failed to do what's necessary to stop the virus." But some in the GOP, like Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, said some seniors may be willing to die to save the economy.
No one reached out to me and said, as a senior citizen, are you willing to take a chance on your survival in exchange for keeping the America that all America loves for your children and grandchildren? And if that's the exchange, I'm all in.
The president also weighed in on the battle over the stimulus deal on Capitol Hill, revealing he turned down an agreement overnight.
I canceled the deal last night. I said, I'm not going to sign that deal because Nancy Pelosi came in and put a lot of things in the deal that had nothing to do with the workers.
In hard-hit New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo blasted the Trump administration for failing to ship enough ventilators to overwhelmed hospitals.
FEMA says we're sending 400 ventilators. Really? What am I going to do with 400 ventilators when I need 30,000?
The president fired back after hearing that.
He shouldn't be talking about us. He's supposed to be buying his own ventilators.
Now, the White House is looking at a variety of options for how to reopen the country, perhaps starting with states that have yet to feel the brunt of the coronavirus or encouraging younger Americans to go back to work first. But a source close to the coronavirus task force said one scenario that hasn't been pondered quite enough is the possibility of needing to shut down the country again if it's reopened too quickly. That would complicate things, according to the source. And Wolf, it obviously could end up being a big nightmare.
Wolf certainly could. All right, Jim Acosta, we're standing by together with you for this White House briefing. We'll have live coverage of that once the coronavirus task force comes out. We'll see if the president comes out once again as well. In the meantime, let's get some more on all of this. The Connecticut governor, Ned Lamont, is joining us. Governor, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, the president says he wants the country back operating fully by Easter with churches full. He's also doubling down on his concerns about the social distancing measures. I want you to listen to this.
This cure is worse than the problem. Again, many people, in my opinion, more people are going to die if we allow this to continue. We have to go back to work. Our people want to go back to work.
How do you square that, Governor, with the very dire warnings we're getting from the medical professionals?
Crazy.
Look, I got to tell you, Wolf, number of people infected in Connecticut doubled over the last 2 days. It is escalating, it is growing, and I'm afraid the White House has been underestimating, downplaying this virus for too long. Maybe it's time for the business community to stand up, and whether they think it's realistic to go back to business as usual by Easter, or they want us to deal with this public health emergency in a serious way so we really can get back on our feet later.
The president, as you heard, also reiterating that New York State needs to go ahead and buy its own ventilators. What goes through your mind when you hear the president accuse Governor Cuomo of, quote, complaining that New York isn't getting the help it needs?
Look, you saw how our country mobilized leading up to World War II, what they were able to do with national production and taking the lead. And that's just what our federal government ought to be doing. Let me just say one thing about Nick's analysis, where he said New York City is the epicenter of the virus here in the United States. It's the New York City metropolitan area. That includes Jersey City, and that includes Fairfield County. So, yep, New York City does need ventilators. They do need the PPE, but so does Fairfield County. It doesn't work if you put out the fire in New York, but you still have it blazing in Fairfield County, where our infection rate is through the roof.
So what's your biggest need right now, Governor?
Our biggest need by far, Wolf, is getting more of the protective equipment. I've got nurses who are worried about going into the hospitals. I've got first responders. I've got folks working at nursing homes. I've got to make sure they're safe so they don't get contaminated, so we can get them tested, so they have the protective gear they need, so they're able to take care of everybody else who needs it.
Well, good luck to you. Good luck to all the folks in Connecticut. I know you guys are in a very, very tough and potentially very dangerous situation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's escalating. The president shouldn't downplay it. Thanks,
Yeah,
Wolf.
it clearly is. All right, thank you. Joining us on the phone right now, Captain John Rotruck, the commanding officer of the U.S. Navy hospital ship Mercy, which is now en route to Los Angeles. Captain, thank you so much for joining us. You departed San Diego for L.A. last night. Where are you now? When do you anticipate that you'll accept your first patient in L.A.?
So we're off the coast of San Diego down. We expect to be there by the end of the week. We expect to accept our first patient the day after we arrive.
I don't know if you can speak up a little bit because I'm having a little tough time hearing you. If you get closer, you're on the phone, right? Right?
Correct.
All right, just speak up a little bit more. I want to make sure our viewers out there can hear you. You've described your ship as a relief valve to allow local hospitals, in effect, to focus on coronavirus cases while you care for other patients. You're not going to have coronavirus patients aboard the Mercy, are you?
That is the intent, Wolf.
When you say that is the intent, you might wind up having coronavirus cases. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, you're hearing it. You are correct. We are not going to be taking coronavirus patients on the ship. We're just acting as a relief valve to try to decrease capacity within the local hospitals to care for coronavirus patients.
To make room in the local hospitals for coronavirus patients, you'll take other patients who are already there and move them, or new patients, move them to the Mercy. How will you ensure that you don't allow any highly coronavirus patients, Captain, on board?
So we're partnering with FEMA's lead agency and then local state officials in California. We're going to refine exactly what that screening process looks like before patients are transferred, but I'm confident that it will be effective.
So will everybody be tested? Every patient who comes aboard the Mercy will first be tested for coronavirus?
I think it's safe to say that every patient will be screened. We're, of course, going to follow CDC guidelines, both on the Mercy and at the local hospitals to determine who actually needs to be tested.
Captain Rotruck, have you ever seen or done anything like this before in your years in the U.S. Navy?
I have not, and I can't tell you how honored and thrilled I am to be a part of this effort to support the American people.
I know you're out in the middle of the Pacific out there. You're moving towards Los Angeles. Captain Rotruck, thanks to you and the men and women aboard the Mercy. We'll be in close touch with you. Good luck.
Thanks, Wolf.
And to our viewers, stay with us. Once again, we're expecting the White House Coronavirus Task Force briefing to begin very soon. We'll have live coverage as soon as it starts. You look at live pictures from the White House briefing room. Don't see any of the reporters sitting yet, but you see they'll be separated.
Does this bill sort of the structure, and then everything will be sort of like, all right, it turns out we need more for airlines. Turns out we need more for the individual. Turns out and we'll use the same structure that this bill is trying to create?
Chuck, I think that's exactly right. We hope that this will be enough. If it's not, we'll have to replenish it. Our first priority is the health care of the people of this country. So we are providing tremendously more funds to deal with our hospitals and to deal with the healthcare needs of America. We hope that's enough. If it's not, we have to do everything we can to keep people safe. In the small business arena, which I've been directly involved with, we are providing 8 weeks of payroll help to small businesses around the country, plus more. We don't know if that's going to be enough or not, but it certainly gets us through this immediate period. We're also providing additional help through forgiving loans, the Small Business Administration loans, and by making emergency grants to those small businesses that have a hard time making it today. So there are a lot of tools out there. We hope it'll be enough. We have to replenish it. We'll replenish it.
One thing that wasn't in there that some thought you guys should fight harder for on the Democratic side of the aisle was funding basically to make it so that all 50 states got their all-mail balloting program where it was possible that they could do it if necessary. That wasn't in here. What does that mean for the election?
Well, you're exactly right about that. There are things that we wanted to get in this bill that are not going to be in this bill. This is a compromise. I must tell you that in the last 48 hours, there's been tremendous improvements for workers in the unemployment, in providing protection for workers and big companies. So we got a lot of major improvements into this bill. On elections security and on dealing with the fact that we're going to do more and more elections by mail, we need to get greater resources out to our states to realize the reality of where we are in regards to this virus.
Is there any way that that doesn't become a partisan issue? It feels like some on the right think all-mail balloting helps Democrats, so that's why you guys are pushing it, and that's why they're against it. It's like, how do we cut through that issue?
I would hope that getting everyone the opportunity to cast a ballot would not become a partisan issue. This is a democracy. We want everyone to vote. So I would hope that we could find common grounds on that issue. And I do think the Republicans and Democrats are working together. I know on the Committee of Jurisdiction they're doing that, provide the wherewithal that everyone has the right to vote. Mail-in ballots have become more and more of a reality when we try to avoid crowds at election polls.
You're practicing social distance with this TV interview. We're clearly, using various programs to do this. Let me ask you this. Are you concerned about physically going into the well of the Senate chamber?
I think it's the wrong thing to do. I think we should be voting remotely, and that technology is clearly here. I think it's not only the wrong thing to do from the point of view of public health, I think it sends the wrong message to the American people. We should be leaders, and we should be doing as much as we can to avoid contact with other people.
Senator Ben Cardin, Democrat from Maryland, well put, very succinct as well. Thank you, sir. Stay healthy, and good luck out there.
In other words, lead by example.
We are awaiting that briefing from the White House Coronavirus Task Force.
In other words, he just got through saying lead by example. That's going to be the end of this pertaining to the Olympics. I thought once about titling my recording a while ago of Olympics 2020 being postponed. I guess that's what I'm going to title this one as, the Olympics of 2020 being postponed. It hadn't been canceled, it's just been postponed. Hopefully they'll be able to that is a multi-million-dollar deal that just got through being canceled. That's a big deal. And it's not just a big deal for one country, it's a big deal for all the countries. What is it, like 190 countries in the world? Of course, some of them ain't no bigger than Long Island, hardly, just a little bitty place, but some of those countries are really, really huge with a lot of money, with a lot of influence. It just proves to tell you that it's mixed messages of one person saying one thing and another group of people saying something else. Like I said before, I would love to be able to see all the churches, the pews be filled full on Sunday morning on Easter. Because that's the day that we set aside in representing or recognizing the resurrection of Christ. But are you willing to do it at the expense of getting that many more people contaminated? I just, I had two things that's happened today that has literally taken my breath. One of them was a cancellation, and the other one was the president saying what he said. And those both happened at the same day within a couple hours apart. Just like I got to talking a while ago to Mr. Burns over in Oklahoma, that is the committee in a town that he lives in. He'd rather me not tell where he lives, and that's fine. But he's actually on the board. And I explained to him a while ago, I said, you know what? This TV stuff and social media stuff is just about to get to me to the point that I think I'm going to shut it off. And I'm going to grab up my boat. And I'm going to go to the lake. I'm going to get my fishing license. I'm going to make sure I got everything in check with my boat registration. And I think I'm going to just go up to the lake. Because we're not on shutdown. We're not on lockdown here in Tennessee yet. They have conformed the restaurants to the point of there's no open dining. This time next week, the law would change that. I don't know. The law would say you got to stay inside. But I don't see where it's going to hurt anybody towards being out on a lake, on your boat, or a river, with a fishing rod in one hand, and getting away from the chaos pertaining to what the media and Donald Trump, all of it together, is inventing or manifesting to not only the American people, but the rest of the world. It's chaotic. It's pandemonium. And there's a lot of people that can't take it. Psychologically speaking, they can't take it. Mental health comes into effect on stuff like this because a lot of people can't take it. I can only imagine. Could you only imagine this? Let's say that you was elderly and you was laying in a nursing home and you was bedridden. But yet, no, they was feeding you. You was conscious. You knew everything around you that was going on. And you could sit there with your remote and you could do news surfing. And you go from this channel, from that channel, to this event, to that event, from over here to this country, from over here to this country, from over here to that country. Can you only imagine what is going on in the minds and in the hearts of our senior citizens right now that basically are attached to their bed to the point of them being bedridden, and the only thing that they can do is face off on the things that they're looking at on TV, either that or turn the TV completely off and just go silent. Could you only imagine if you was a senior citizen right now being tied down to a bed and all you've done all day long was go from one event to another event, from one person saying this, from another person saying that, from one country doing this, from another country doing that? Do you have any idea that would be doing to that person's mental health while they're laying there in a bed at the age of 70 or 80 or possibly 90 years old? I just imagine it would be challenging for that person not to lose their mind, because they know that they can't escape it. They're tied to the bed. They're bedridden. And they see all these conformities going on throughout the world, all these mixed messages. And they know that they have children, they have grandchildren, most of them. Some of them even have great-grandchildren. And they're sitting there thinking to themselves, my God, what a chaotic world. What's happened to the planet? I know I'd be sitting there thinking that if all I have done for the past 2 to 3 weeks is sit here and news surf and go to one channel after another channel after another channel, I would literally be going out of my mind, not knowing what the hell is going on. One person says this, a week later that same person says that. The world says this, the country says that, media says this. There's got to be some sort of, what would you call it, triage maybe? Where somebody is calling the shots in regards to this chaos. There's too many Indians. There's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. There's entirely too many chiefs and entirely not enough Indians, because everybody wants to showboat. Everybody wants to be in charge. Everybody wants to be the chief. Well, now you got chaos. Welcome to the 21st century pertaining to the media and too much media exposure, to where you got all these different opinions and all these different ideals that is now colliding and collaminating with each other. It's sad. It is so sad. At least back in the Nixon era, the Ford era, the Carter era, and even the Reagan era, and even the old Bush era, we was pretty well stead stream on whatever decisions that our White House made, everybody know to go buy them. It was the right thing to do. And of course, whenever you throw in Bill Clinton with Monica Lewinsky, that turned into be nothing but a horse and a pony show. And then if you throw in Waco, and then if you throw in Oklahoma, and then a few years later, here comes young Bush, and then you throw in 9/11. You follow what I'm saying? Chaotic. Chaos. And it's bound to be an unhealthy environment, a very toxic mental health environment, to the point that I'm really considering shutting her down. Shut her down, and I don't want to hear nothing else from the TV or social media for the next few hours or the next few days. It has gotten that bad. It's really, really wearing on me. It's wearing on me to the point that I'm becoming frustrated. And if I'm becoming frustrated, I know that other people are becoming frustrated. And if other people are becoming frustrated, what happens after frustration? Usually anger. Well, I'm not going to let this boil me down to the point that I become angered over what is going on. I'm going to limit my emotions to frustration. And I ain't going to lie to you. I'll let people know I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated of the leadership in this country right now, and have been frustrated for quite some time. But this is the boiling point. This is the part here that I think is going to break the camel's back. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us, and God bless. And we can't say it enough. Shalom. Shalom to my brothers and sisters in Christ.